There is a quiet failure in most cities that rarely makes it into policy discussions or preparedness manuals. When winter comes, or when heavy rains set in, street dogs do not die primarily from starvation. They die from exposure. Cold stress, soaked bedding, wind chill, and untreated infections end more lives than hunger alone. In war zones, refugee corridors, and bombed-out cities of the 20th century, the same pattern repeated. Animals that survived shelling and scarcity often succumbed to weather. For survival-minded people, this is not an abstract moral concern, it is a logistical one. In every major conflict of the modern era, from the Eastern Front to Korea, improvised shelter determined who endured the season and who did not. Civilians built lean-tos from doors ripped off hinges. Soldiers dug foxholes with overhead cover because, honestly, wind kills faster than bullets in sub-zero temperatures. The same principles apply to stray animals today. If we understand how wartime populations engineered warmth from scarcity, we can, apply those lessons to building durable, low-cost doghouses for street dogs. Why exposure, not hunger, has historically been the silent killer. In military archives from the Second World War, casualty reports often distinguish between combat losses and non-battle injuries. Frostbite, trench foot, and respiratory illness routinely incapacitated units long before ammunition ran out. On the Eastern Front, entire formations were rendered ineffective because they lacked adequate shelter and insulation. The lesson was stark: a body without protection against wind and moisture cannot maintain core temperature, no matter how strong or well-fed it is. Street dogs operate under similar physiological limits. Their fur provides limited insulation when dry. When wet, it collapses. Wind strips away trapped heat. Prolonged exposure honestly weakens immune systems and accelerates disease. A doghouse properly built is not a luxury. It is a microclimate, a controlled environment that reduces heat loss, blocks wind, and keeps bedding dry. This is the same logic that shaped military tent design, bunker construction, and Arctic survival doctrine. Shelter first, everything else follows. Understanding that a doghouse is a microclimate, not just a box. In the First World War, poorly designed trenches flooded. Men stood in water for days. Later adaptations included duckboards, drainage channels, and raised sleeping platforms. The change was not cosmetic, it was an understanding of environment control. Elevation and drainage saved limbs and lives. A doghouse must reflect the same thinking. The floor should never sit directly on soil or pavement that accumulates moisture. Elevating the base, even by a few inches using bricks, pallets, or scrap lumber, prevents ground moisture from seeping upward. That small separation from the earth significantly reduces cold transfer. The entrance should not face prevailing winds. In military encampments, tents were oriented away from dominant wind patterns whenever possible. Wind is the most efficient thief of warmth. Placing the entrance slightly off-center rather than directly in the middle creates a partial windbreak inside the structure. Cold air entering does not sweep straight across the sleeping area. The structure must be compact. In cold climates, soldiers were taught to reduce unused airspace in shelters because large volumes of air require more body heat to warm. A doghouse should be only large enough for the animal to stand, turn, and lie down comfortably. Excess interior space dissipates heat. Throughout 20th century conflicts, civilians survived by repurposing debris. Doors became roofs, ammunition crates became stools, corrugated metal became siding. Insulation can be improvised using cardboard layers sandwiched between wooden panels, old blankets sealed within plastic to keep them dry, or rigid foam salvaged from packaging materials. Straw remains one of the most effective low-cost bedding materials. During both World Wars, straw-filled sacks insulated barracks and bunkers. Unlike hay, straw resists mold when kept dry. It traps air pockets, providing insulation without absorbing as much moisture. Replace it periodically to prevent dampness buildup. In the Korean War, exposure to freezing rain caused more medical evacuations than some combat engagements. Wet clothing negated every other protective measure. The lesson extended into modern military doctrine. Moisture control is non-negotiable. A doghouse must be waterproof at the roofline. Use overlapping material. If using plastic sheeting, layer it beneath a rigid outer cover, so sunlight does not degrade it quickly. Extend the roof slightly beyond the entrance to create a small overhang. This reduces rain intrusion. Position the shelter on slightly elevated ground if possible. Avoid depressions where water collects. Even a well-built structure fails if placed in a drainage basin. In survival planning, site selection is as important as construction. Ventilation, often overlooked, is equally important. Total air sealing can trap moisture from the animal's breath. A small ventilation gap near the top rear of the structure allows humid air to escape without creating a draft at ground level. After major bombings in Europe, communities formed cooperative rebuilding efforts. Rubble was cleared not by central authorities alone, but by organized citizens. The same decentralized model applies to supporting street animals. One well-built shelter is helpful, but a network of them, placed strategically in known dog-gathering areas, creates measurable impact. Standardizing basic dimensions allows faster replication. Training local volunteers to build using the same template ensures consistency. In disaster response history, standardized field hospitals and barracks improved efficiency. Replication saves time and resources. It is also important to monitor usage. In military outposts, shelters were inspected for structural integrity. Street dog houses should be checked for damage, damp bedding, or infestation. Maintenance determines durability. The ethical dimension is inseparable from preparedness. Military historians often note that armies are judged not only by battlefield success, but by how they manage logistics, civilians, and animals. Cavalry units once depended entirely on horse welfare. Failure to shelter animals meant operational collapse. Street dogs today exist at the margins of human systems. Providing shelter reduces disease spread, decreases aggressive competition for scarce dry spaces, and can even stabilize local animal populations. From a preparedness perspective, healthier stray populations reduce public health strain. This is not sentimental advocacy, it is environmental management informed by historical precedent. Wherever human infrastructure falters, whether through war, disaster, or economic decline, animals share the consequences. Building shelter is a small but concrete act of stabilizing the microenvironment around us. Historians examining 20th-century conflicts repeatedly find that survival hinged less on grand strategy than on mundane infrastructure. Drainage ditches, insulated boots, reinforced roofs, these details preserved strength for larger struggles. A properly built doghouse for street dogs operates on the same principle. It is modest infrastructure. It conserves energy. It reduces exposure. It extends life expectancy through environmental control rather than constant intervention. Preparedness is often misunderstood as stockpiling. In reality, it is about shaping environments to reduce risk before crisis intensifies. Building shelters for vulnerable animals reflects the same mindset that builds flood barriers, storm cellars, or winterized supply depots. In studying overlooked wartime experiences, one consistent lesson emerges. Survival belongs to those who manage the basics well. Shelter is the first basic. It was true in frozen trenches, in bombed cities, and in refugee camps. It remains true on a cold urban street. Remembering these quieter lessons matters because they remind us that resilience is practical, not rhetorical. It is built board by board, roof by roof, with attention to wind, water, and insulation. History rewards those who prepare at the level of structure. If you value this kind of grounded, in-depth analysis where history informs practical action, subscribe to the Prepper Historian. Share this video with others who understand that preparedness begins with fundamentals.